I wasn't expecting the day to mean
Hi, I didn't
anything.
expect to
Just
see
another
you
quiet
here.
afternoon. The kind where
Oh,
you slip into a
hi.
cafe to escape the
I'm
noise
just
outside
reading.
and maybe steal an hour of stillness. But the moment she walked in, the air shifted. She wasn't trying to be noticed, and maybe that's why I couldn't look away. A woman in her early 40s, carrying herself with the kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. Her hair was swept back loosely, strands falling free around her face, and the faint tiredness beneath her eyes only made her beauty feel more real, more lived in. I tried to focus on my book, but my eyes betrayed me. She took the table near the window, sunlight touching the curve of her cheek and softening the seriousness in her expression. There was something magnetic in the way she simply existed. Not the exaggerated kind of beauty that turns heads, but the quiet sort that makes you want to linger, to learn the story behind every glance and movement. The first time her gaze met mine, it wasn't even deliberate. Just a passing glance while she stirred her coffee. But something in it, calm, curious, unbothered, sent a spark low in my chest. I looked away too quickly, pretending to read, yet I felt her presence settle in the room like a weight I couldn't shake. When she stood, I thought she was leaving. Instead, she walked past my table. The faint scent of her perfume followed subtle, like vanilla warmed by sunlight. Her shoulder brushed mine lightly, and though it could have been an accident, the touch lingered in my mind as if my body refused to forget it. I caught the small things about her, how she wrapped both hands around her coffee cup as though it wasn't just for warmth but for grounding. How her lips curved faintly when she smiled at the barista, polite, but a little distracted. She seemed like someone carrying more than she let on, and that quiet weight drew me in even more. When she returned to her table, she glanced at me again. This time, her eyes stayed for just a second longer than polite. Enough for me to feel a rush of heat that didn't belong in such an ordinary moment. I didn't speak to her that day, not really. Just a brief exchange when she asked if the seat near the window was free. My voice betrayed me, softer than I intended, and she gave the smallest smile before settling down. It wasn't much. A look, a brush of her shoulder, a shared breath in the quiet. But when she finally gathered her things and left, I found myself staring at the empty space she had occupied. The cafe felt suddenly colder, quieter. That was the first time I realized something dangerous. Sometimes a single encounter is enough to change the way silence feels. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. Yet a few days later, there she was, same cafe, same table by the window, as if it belonged to her. This time, I arrived first, and when she walked in, our eyes met before she had even set her bag down. She gave a small nod, polite but warmer than the last time. It was enough to make my chest tighten with something that felt both reckless and inevitable. We began with simple exchanges, comments about the weather, the coffee, the unreliable Wi-Fi that always cut out when people needed it most. She spoke with a voice that was both firm and soft, steady yet carrying hints of laughter waiting to be coaxed out. There was wit in her words, but also restraint. She knew how to share just enough, never too much. As the minutes stretched, I found myself listening less to the words and more to her pauses. The way she tilted her head when considering a thought. The curve of her lips when teasing me for being too young to drink coffee this strong. I laughed, but inside, I felt the truth she was testing me with. That unspoken reminder of the years between us. At one point, she leaned in across the small table to emphasize something funny she'd noticed outside. The space between us collapsed in an instant, her hand resting near mine, her perfume mixing with the faint roast of the cafe air. For a heartbeat, it felt like we were the only two people there. And then, just as quickly, she pulled back. She looked at me with a half smile, half warning, and said quietly, "Don't get too close." The words hung there, softer than a command but firmer than a joke. I should have nodded, laughed it off, let it drift away. But the sincerity in her eyes told me she meant it. She was drawing a line, one she needed for reasons she didn't yet explain. I forced myself to lean back, to respect the space she had reclaimed. But inside, I felt the shift, like I had been pulled toward a flame only to be reminded that fire burns. Still, the pull didn't stop. If anything, the warning made it stronger. Because even as she tried to create distance, her body betrayed her. Her gaze lingered a little too long when she thought I wasn't looking. Her fingers brushed mine briefly when she passed the sugar, and she didn't move them away immediately. And when she laughed, it wasn't guarded. It was free, the kind of laughter that fills a room and makes you want to hear it again. I realized then that what she said and what she felt might not be perfectly aligned. She warned me not to get close, but in every small gesture, she was the one drawing me in. By the time she left that day, I knew I was already in trouble. Because you can tell yourself not to cross a line, but when someone keeps pulling you toward it with nothing more than a glance, resistance feels like pretending. The weather turned a few days later. Rain poured hard against the city, the kind that blurred lights and drowned footsteps. I ducked into the café, shaking the water from my jacket, and found her already there. She was alone by the window again, but this time she looked different. Her confidence was still there, but softened, dulled slightly by the storm outside, or maybe by something heavier inside her. She looked up when I entered. No smile at first, just recognition. Then, slowly, her lips curved, and she motioned to the empty chair across from her. We didn't speak much at first. The rain filled the silence, tapping against the glass like a steady drum. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, eyes drifting toward the street. There was a stillness about her, but not the peaceful kind. It was the quiet of someone carrying something unsaid. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Do you ever feel like people see only what they want from you, not who you actually are? The question caught me off guard. I nodded, unsure how much to say, but encouraged by the honesty in her tone. All the time, I admitted. It's like you become a version of yourself just to make sense to them. Her eyes flickered to mine, searching, as if weighing whether I really understood. She sighed then, a sound that carried both weariness and relief. After my divorce, everyone seemed to have their own idea of who I was supposed to be. Strong, independent, untouchable. But no one asked how it actually felt. She stopped stirring her coffee and set the spoon down, her hand trembling slightly before she hid it under the table. I didn't push. I just let the silence hold her words in place, as if saying them aloud had already cost her something. When she finally looked at me again, her expression was softer, almost vulnerable. Without thinking too much, I placed my hand gently on the table, close enough for her to reach if she wanted. For a long moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, her hand slid toward mine until her fingers rested lightly against my skin. The touch was small, but it carried a weight that tightened my chest. Her hand was warm, steadying, yet I could feel the faint tremor in her fingers. I didn't move, didn't grip her hand or pull her closer. I simply let her touch stay, anchoring us both in that fragile space where words felt unnecessary. Her eyes dropped, lashes lowering, and she exhaled as though releasing something she'd held for too long. The rain outside grew heavier, but inside, the silence felt tender, almost protective. In that moment, I realized something dangerous. It wasn't her laughter or her confidence that pulled me in. It was her honesty, her cracks, the parts of her she tried to hide. And as much as she warned me not to get close, here she was, resting her hand against mine, pulling me in without even meaning to. After that night in the rain, something between us shifted. I could feel it even before she spoke to me again. The next time we met at the café, there was a quiet energy in the air, like we were both aware of the line we kept circling but never crossing. She looked at me longer now, though she tried not to. Her eyes would linger for just a second too long, then retreat as though burned by their own honesty. I caught myself doing the same, and each time, the silence between us thickened until even the clinking of cups felt loud. That afternoon, she had brought a stack of folders with her, papers spilling out in uneven piles. I offered to help carry them when she decided to leave, and though she hesitated, she finally allowed it. The stack was heavier than it looked, and as we walked out into the street together, our hands brushed along the edges of the folders. The contact was brief, but the tension it carried felt anything but accidental. When we reached her car, I handed her the folders. She adjusted them against her hip, then paused, looking at me with a mix of gratitude and unease. "You shouldn't be this kind to me," she said softly, almost as if it were a warning to herself. I frowned. "Why not?" Her lips pressed together, as though she wanted to say more but couldn't. She finally looked away, shaking her head. "Because it makes things harder." The words stuck with me. Harder for who? For her? For me, or for both of us? Later that week, the push and pull reached its peak. We were sitting closer than usual, tucked into the corner of the café where the lighting was dim and the outside world felt far away. She leaned across the table, reaching out to fix the collar of my shirt. Her fingers brushed against my neck, light, fleeting, but enough to freeze me in place. Her touch was careful, almost maternal in its intention, but the air shifted instantly. My breath caught, and for a moment, her hand lingered longer than necessary. The heat of her skin against mine sent a rush straight through me. Our eyes locked. Neither of us moved. Her hand slipped away slowly, reluctantly, as if she'd realized the intimacy of what she had just done. That was when she said it, barely above a whisper. "This can't happen." The words should have drawn a line clear and final. But instead, they lit a fire in my chest. Before I could stop myself, I answered with the truth pressing against my ribs. "Then stop pulling me in." She froze. Her lips parted as though she had a reply, but nothing came. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. The dim light, the hum of the café, the closeness of her presence all suspended in a fragile, dangerous balance. And then, just as quickly, she looked away. She stood, gathering her things with careful precision, her movements too controlled to be casual. As she left, her perfume lingered in the air between us, and I sat there realizing that no matter how hard she tried to push me away, every touch, every glance, every word only drew me closer. It was easier when it was just the two of us. In the quiet corners of the café, or in the hush of a rain-filled evening, our world felt like it belonged to no one else. But life has a way of pulling even the most private feelings into the open. The first time I noticed it, we were walking side by side, leaving the café together. The sky had just begun to darken, the streets alive with people heading home. A pair of women passed us, their conversation halting as their eyes flicked toward her. Then me. I caught the faintest smirk on one of their faces before they whispered something and moved on. She noticed it too. I felt the way her body tensed beside me, the way her steps quickened as if she wanted to outrun the glances. When I tried to make light of it, "They don't matter." She only shook her head, her expression unreadable. In the days that followed, I saw the shift. She grew quieter, more careful. Where once she had leaned toward me, now she leaned back, placing invisible space between us even while we sat together. Her laughter was shorter, her glances rarer, her hands kept folded neatly in her lap. I told myself I could handle it, that patience was all she needed. But patience has its own weight. Every time I caught her avoiding my gaze, it was like watching a door close a little further, shutting me out inch by inch. One evening, I confronted her gently. We were sitting at our usual table, the hum of conversation surrounding us. "You've been distant," I said quietly, not accusing, just observing. Her eyes lifted to mine, soft but heavy. "People are starting to notice." And she hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "And they're not kind about it." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Do you care what they think?" Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Don't you?" The truth was complicated. Of course I cared, but not enough to let it dictate what I felt. Still, I could see how different it was for her. She had lived longer, had a history people thought they had the right to interpret. For me, whispers were just noise. For her, they were echoes of battles she had already fought. That night, as we parted, she didn't let our hands brush like before. She kept her arms close to her sides, eyes fixed ahead. I walked beside her, silent, feeling the ache of distance more than the nearness of her presence. And yet, when we reached the corner where we usually said goodbye, she paused. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine for the briefest moment. There it was again, that softness, that pull she tried so hard to hide. It flickered across her face before she turned away, leaving me with the truth I couldn't ignore. No matter how loudly the world whispered, her silence said more. She wanted me close, even if she couldn't admit it out loud. The distance between us grew like an unspoken agreement. We still saw each other, still shared conversations, but the nearness we once allowed had been carefully folded away. She sat straighter now, her hands always guarded, her laughter kept at arm's length. I told myself it was enough, that even a sliver of her presence was better than nothing at all. But late at night, I kept replaying the way she once rested her hand over mine, the way her eyes softened when she let her guard slip. That memory stayed alive inside me, whispering that the walls she built weren't as solid as she wanted them to be. One evening, fate, or maybe something quieter and stronger, intervened. A small gathering at a mutual friend's house stretched late into the night. Laughter, stories, glasses clinking. And when people began to leave, somehow, she and I were the last two lingering in the living room. The house had grown quiet, only the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen breaking the silence. She stood near the window, looking out into the night, her arms folded lightly around herself. There was no audience now, no whispers, no watchful eyes. Just us. I approached slowly, not wanting to intrude. "You look like you're 1,000 miles away," I said softly. She gave a small laugh, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe I am." I hesitated, then asked, "Do you want me to leave you alone?" For a moment she didn't answer. Then, her voice dropped, barely audible. "No. Stay." That single word unraveled something inside me. I stepped closer, careful, until I stood beside her. The glow of the street lamp outside painted her face in half-light, highlighting both her strength and the quiet tremor of vulnerability beneath it. She sighed, her shoulders dipping slightly. "You unsettle me," she confessed, her voice low, as if afraid the walls themselves might hear. "I've built a life that feels safe, predictable. And then you came along and made me feel like everything could change." Her words hit me with both weight and tenderness. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached out slowly, letting my hand hover for a second before resting it gently over hers where she held her arm. She stiffened for a breath. Then, so carefully it almost broke me, she let her fingers uncurl and slip into mine. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, alive, carrying everything words couldn't. She turned toward me slightly, her eyes shining in the dim light. And then she stepped closer, closing the distance that had haunted us for weeks. Her arms slipped around me, tentative at first, then firmer. Her head rested lightly against my chest, and I felt her breath steadying, as if she had finally allowed herself to stop holding it in. My arms circled her gently, no urgency, just the simple truth of being there. Anchoring her, grounding her, promising without words that I wasn't going anywhere. For the first time, she didn't pull away. And in that moment, the world outside, the whispers, the judgment, the rules we tried to obey, faded into silence. There was only her heartbeat, quiet but steady, pressed against mine. After that night, something in her changed. Not all at once. She was still careful, still measured in the way she carried herself around me. But the walls weren't as high anymore. There was a quietness between us now, not of distance, but of something unspoken we had both decided not to fight. We still met in the same places. The café, the quiet walks, the evenings where the world blurred around us. But she no longer leaned away when our shoulders brushed. She no longer pulled her hand back too quickly when it found mine by accident. And when she laughed, it reached her eyes again. Freer, lighter, like a burden had shifted off her chest. One evening, we sat outside beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain still lingering from earlier in the day. We weren't talking much, just sitting side by side on a bench, letting silence do the work words couldn't. She broke it softly. "You know this isn't what I planned for my life." I turned to her, catching the way her eyes shimmered in the faint light. "Neither did I admitted. Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, more like an acknowledgement. She looked away, as though gathering courage, then whispered, "I warned you not to get too close." There was no resistance in her tone this time. No sharp edge, no heavy distance. Just honesty, and something fragile beneath it. I let the silence stretch before answering, my voice low but steady. "Then stop pulling me in." Her breath caught, the kind of pause that carries both fear and relief. And then, instead of replying, she reached out. Her hand found mine, deliberate this time, her fingers weaving through with a gentleness that felt like a decision being made. For a while, we stayed like that, just holding hands, letting the night fold around us. It wasn't a grand confession or a sudden declaration. It was quieter, more human. Two people accepting the truth they had been circling for so long. Eventually, she shifted closer, resting her head lightly against my shoulder. I felt the warmth of her cheek through the fabric of my shirt, the weight of her leaning into me not out of weakness, but out of trust. My arm wrapped around her almost naturally, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. We didn't need to speak. The closeness was enough. The world would still whisper, of course. People would still look, still wonder, still judge. But sitting there with her head against me, her hand resting securely in mine, I realized none of that mattered. Not in this moment. Because for the first time, she wasn't pulling away. She was choosing to stay close. And so was I.